There's a very specific kind of panic that hits when everyone around you is losing their minds over someone, and you genuinely have no idea who they are. That's exactly the position a Wiltshire bar manager found herself in recently, standing face to face with one of British television's most recognizable men, and not having a clue who he was. Her name is Erin Williams. She took over the pub last year, and by all accounts, it was a completely ordinary shift until the moment it very suddenly wasn't. Because while her staff immediately clocked exactly who had just walked through the door, Erin didn't. Not a flicker of recognition. The man standing in front of her was Bradley Walsh, quiz show royalty, a face that's been on British screens for decades, and to her, he was simply a customer. You can imagine the scene behind her. Staff members practically vibrating with excitement, one of them reportedly blurting out something along the lines of disbelief that he was actually there, standing in their pub. That's the kind of reaction Bradley Walsh tends to produce wherever he goes, the collective gasp, the scramble for phones, the sudden electric shift in atmosphere that happens when a familiar face turns up somewhere completely unfamiliar to find them. And in the middle of all that excitement was Erin, quietly working out that she was the only person in the room who hadn't clocked what all the fuss was about. Here's where it gets genuinely charming though. Erin didn't try to fake it. She didn't nod along and pretend she knew exactly who he was just to avoid an awkward moment. She actually told him. Straight to his face, mid-photograph, she admitted she had absolutely no idea who he was. If you've ever had that split second of dread before admitting you don't recognize someone everyone else clearly does, you'll understand exactly how vulnerable that moment must have felt. There's a real risk in admitting that kind of thing out loud to the person themselves, especially someone as established as Bradley Walsh. It could have gone badly. It could have felt insulting even if it wasn't meant that way. But it didn't go badly at all. According to Erin, Bradley's response was exactly the kind of moment that makes a story worth telling months later. He didn't seem offended in the slightest. If anything, it sounds like he found the whole thing genuinely funny, treating her honest confusion with warmth rather than any sense of wounded ego. And that reaction says a lot, honestly, more than people might initially give it credit for. Because think about the position someone like Bradley Walsh is usually in. He's recognized constantly, everywhere he goes, by pretty much everyone in the country who's ever turned on a television during the daytime. That kind of non-stop recognition could easily calcify into expectation, the quiet assumption that of course people know who you are. So when someone doesn't, and says so directly, there are two ways that moment can land. It can feel like a small blow to the ego, or it can feel refreshing, a rare pocket of ordinary human interaction in a life that's mostly filled with people who already know exactly who you are before you've said a word. By every account of how this played out, Bradley chose the second read entirely and turned it into something funny rather than something awkward. There's also something worth noting in why Erin didn't recognize him in the first place. She's explained that she grew up in South Africa, which naturally puts her outside the specific cultural memory that most of the UK carries around Bradley Walsh, built up over literal decades of Saturday night entertainment, soap operas, and daytime quiz shows. It's easy to forget, living inside British television culture, that fame here doesn't automatically travel. Someone can be one of the most familiar faces in the country and still be a complete stranger to someone who simply grew up somewhere else, watching entirely different programs. That detail turns this from just a funny anecdote into something a little more interesting about how localized celebrity actually is, and how strange it must feel to exist as someone who's instantly recognizable in one country and a total unknown just a plane ride away. What makes this story travel the way it has isn't really the fame gap itself, though. It's the kindness in how Bradley handled it. There's no shortage of stories about famous people reacting badly to being unrecognized, treating it as some kind of slight against their status. This is the opposite of that. A moment that could have gone sideways instead became something warm, something Erin was clearly comfortable enough to laugh about and share afterwards, rather than something she felt embarrassed to admit ever happened. And maybe that's really the heart of why people keep sharing stories like this about him. It's not the punchlines, and it's not even really the pub visit itself. It's the consistent pattern underneath all of it, story after story, of someone who seems to treat ordinary people exactly the way he treats everyone else, unbothered by whether they know who he is or not. So what do you think made the difference here? Was it simply Bradley's personality? Or is there something bigger about how we expect celebrities to react in moments like this that made this story stand out the way it did?